The room was heavy with the scent of old money and polished oak as 17-year-old Maya Evans sat alone in the corner, her worn sneakers scuffing the floor, while the wealthy Langston family sneered at her presence during the will reading. Their whispers cut like knives, mocking her as an outsider, until the lawyer's voice broke through, announcing that the entire fortune, every mansion, every dollar, had been left to her. In that moment, their smug faces froze, and Maya's heart raced, knowing the truth she'd hidden was about to unravel a family's legacy and change everything. The grand library of the Langston estate smelled of aged leather and dust, its towering bookshelves looming like silent judges over the gathering. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow, their light catching on the gold-framed portraits of stern-faced ancestors that lined the walls. Maya Evans sat on a stiff velvet chair in the corner, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her dark eyes scanning the room with a mix of caution and curiosity. At 17, she was out of place among the tailored suits and designer dresses of the Langston family, her faded jeans and second-hand sweater a stark contrast to their opulence. Her skin, a rich brown, seemed to draw their glances, some curious, most dismissive, as they whispered among themselves, their words sharp with disdain. Maya was used to being overlooked, a foster kid who'd bounced between homes, but today, her presence in this room felt like a spark in a powder keg, and she could sense the explosion coming. The Langston family filled the room, their wealth as palpable as the heavy air. Edward Langston, the eldest son, lounged in a high-backed chair, his silver hair slicked back, his smirk a permanent fixture as he murmured to his wife, Cynthia, whose diamond earrings glinted with every nod. Their daughter, Olivia, 25 and sharp-eyed, scrolled on her phone, occasionally glancing at Maya with a mix of pity and scorn. Edward's younger brother, Philip, paced near the fireplace, his face flushed, his hands fidgeting as if he could already feel the fortune slipping through his fingers. The family patriarch, William Langston, had died 2 weeks ago, his passing a shock that left the city buzzing about his billion-dollar empire. Real estate, tech investments, and a sprawling vineyard. Maya had only met him a handful of times, brief encounters that left her with more questions than answers. Yet here she was, summoned to the reading of his will, an outsider in a world of privilege. The lawyer, a wiry man named Thomas Reed, stood at the head of the room, his glasses perched low on his nose as he adjusted a stack of papers. His gray suit was immaculate, but his hands trembled slightly, betraying the weight of what he was about to reveal. The family's chatter faded as he cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Maya's stomach twisted, her fingers brushing against a small, worn notebook in her pocket. A gift from William, given during their last meeting, its pages filled with cryptic notes she hadn't yet deciphered. She'd been 15 when she first met him, a chance encounter at a community center where she volunteered, his kind eyes and quiet questions catching her off guard. He'd returned over the months, always asking about her life, her dreams, never revealing much about himself. Now, as Thomas began to speak, Maya felt the weight of those moments, as if they'd been leading to this. Thomas's voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of tension as he began reading the will. The family leaned forward, their anticipation palpable, expecting the fortune to be divided among them. Edward's smirk widened, Olivia set her phone down, and Philip stopped pacing, his eyes gleaming. Maya sat still, her heart pounding, feeling like an intruder in a story that wasn't hers. Thomas outlined minor bequests first, charities, distant cousins, a loyal housekeeper. Each name met with nods or sighs from the family. Then he paused, his eyes flicking to Maya, and the room seemed to hold its breath. He announced that William had left his entire estate. Every property, every share, every cent, to Maya Evans, a girl with no blood tie to the Langstons, a name they barely knew. The words landed like a thunderclap, the room erupting in gasps and protests, Edward's chair scraping as he stood, his face red with fury. Maya's breath caught, her mind reeling as the family's eyes turned to her, a mix of shock and venom. Cynthia's hand flew to her chest, her diamond rings flashing, while Olivia's mouth fell open, her phone forgotten. Philip's voice broke through, sharp and accusing, demanding to know who Maya was, why she was here. Thomas raised a hand, his voice firm, explaining that William's decision was airtight, backed by notarized documents and witnesses. Maya felt the notebook in her pocket, its weight suddenly heavier, as if it held the key to why William had chosen her. She remembered his last words to her, spoken softly in the community center's garden. "You're stronger than you know, Maya. Don't let them tell you otherwise." At the time, she'd thought he meant her foster parents. But now, facing the Langstons' rage, she wondered if he'd meant his own family. Edward's voice cut through the chaos, his tone icy as he demanded proof, accusing Maya of manipulation, of being a con artist who'd wormed her way into William's trust. The words stung, but Maya met his gaze, her jaw tight, refusing to shrink under their scrutiny. She thought of the years she'd spent invisible, moving from home to home, her dreams of college and a better life always just out of reach. William had seen something in her, something she was only beginning to understand, and his faith gave her a spark of courage. Thomas continued, detailing the estate's scope, mansions, investments, a trust fund that would make Maya one of the richest teenagers in the country. The family's protests grew louder, but Thomas's voice held firm, backed by the weight of William's signature. The library felt smaller now, the air thick with betrayal and disbelief. Maya's hands trembled, but she kept them clasped, her eyes darting to the door, wondering if she could escape the hostility closing in. Olivia approached, her heels clicking, her voice low but venomous, asking how a nobody could deserve this. Maya's throat tightened, but she thought of William's notebook, its pages a puzzle she hadn't yet solved. She wondered about his life, his regrets, why he'd chosen her over his own blood. The family's anger was a storm, but beneath it, Maya felt a quiet strength growing, a sense that this moment was the start of something bigger, a truth that would unravel not just the Langstons' world, but her own. The Langston estate's library felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with the scent of old books and the sharp tang of resentment that hung over the family like a storm cloud. Maya Evans sat rigidly in her corner chair, her worn sneakers pressed against the polished floor, her fingers tracing the edge of the notebook in her pocket as if it could anchor her against the chaos unfolding around her. The chandelier's light cast jagged shadows across the room, mirroring the fractured emotions of the Langston family, whose faces were a gallery of shock, anger, and betrayal. Edward Langston stood near the center, his silver hair glinting as he loomed over Thomas Reed, the lawyer, his voice low but venomous, demanding to know how a 17-year-old foster kid with no connection to their lineage could inherit their father's fortune. Maya's heart pounded, her dark eyes flicking between the family's glares and the heavy oak table where Thomas's papers lay, each page a testament to a decision that had turned her world upside down. Cynthia, Edward's wife, clutched her pearl necklace, her knuckles pale, her lips pressed into a thin line as she whispered furiously to Olivia, who was now standing, her phone forgotten, her eyes burning with a mix of disbelief and indignation. Philip, the younger brother, paced near the fireplace, his face flushed, his hands clenching and unclenching as if he could physically wrestle the fortune back into his grasp. The gallery of onlookers, family associates, a few distant cousins, and a reporter who'd slipped in, watched with bated breath, their murmurs a soft undercurrent that amplified the room's tension. Maya felt their stares, each one a weight, but she kept her chin up, remembering William's words in the community center's garden. His voice warm and steady. "You're stronger than you know." She clung to that memory, a lifeline in the storm of hostility. Thomas Reed adjusted his glasses, his face calm but his eyes wary, as he addressed Edward's accusations. He explained that William had revised his will 6 months ago, meeting with Maya multiple times to ensure his intentions were clear. The documents were notarized, witnessed, and legally binding, leaving no room for contest. Edward's face reddened, his voice rising as he accused Thomas of negligence, of failing to protect the family's legacy. Maya's stomach twisted, the word legacy echoing in her mind. She'd never thought of herself as part of anyone's legacy, let alone William's. Her life had been a series of temporary homes, foster parents who saw her as a paycheck, and dreams of stability that always seemed out of reach. Yet William had seen something in her, enough to entrust her with everything he'd built. Olivia stepped closer to Maya, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood, her voice a low hiss as she leaned in. She asked how Maya had known her father, what she'd done to manipulate him, her words dripping with the assumption that Maya was an opportunist. Maya's throat tightened, but she met Olivia's gaze, her voice steady as she said she'd only met William at the community center, where he'd volunteered, asking her about her life, her studies, her hopes. She didn't mention the notebook, its pages filled with William's handwriting. Quotes, dates, fragments of thoughts she hadn't yet pieced together. Olivia scoffed, turning away, but Maya saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, as if the sincerity in Maya's voice had cracked her certainty. Thomas continued, detailing the scope of William's estate: 3 mansions, a vineyard in Napa, a tech portfolio worth billions, and a trust fund that would sustain Maya for generations. Each asset was a dagger to the family, their expressions shifting from anger to desperation. Philip stopped pacing, his voice breaking as he asked why William would do this, why he'd betray his own blood. Thomas hesitated, then revealed that William had left a letter, to be read only to Maya after the will's announcement. The room stilled, the family's eyes snapping to Maya, who felt her breath catch. A letter? She hadn't known, but the thought of William's words waiting for her felt like a secret shared between them. A final gift from a man who'd seen her when no one else had. The family's protests grew louder, Edward demanding to see the letter, claiming it was their right. Thomas refused, his tone firm, stating that William's instructions were explicit. Cynthia's voice rose, shrill and accusing, suggesting Maya had coerced William during his final months, when his health was failing. Maya's chest ached, the accusation cutting deep, but she thought of the community center, the way William had listened to her talk about her dream of studying engineering, his eyes bright with pride. He'd given her the notebook that day, saying it was something to hold on to, something to remind her of her worth. She hadn't understood then, but now, with the family's anger swirling around her, she felt its weight, a clue to a truth she was only beginning to uncover. The reporter in the corner scribbled furiously, his presence a reminder that this story would soon spill beyond the estate, into headlines and whispers across the city. Maya felt exposed, her life about to be dissected by strangers, but she also felt a spark of defiance. She wasn't just a foster kid anymore. She was the heir to an empire, and that truth, however daunting, gave her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Edward approached Thomas again, his voice lower now, almost pleading, offering to negotiate to buy Maya out. Thomas shook his head, his loyalty to William's wishes unwavering. Maya watched, her mind racing, wondering what the letter would say, what secrets it held about William's choice. As the meeting adjourned, The family lingered, their anger a palpable force, but Maya stood, her movements slow but deliberate, her eyes meeting theirs without flinching. She thought of her foster homes, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, the dreams she'd buried to survive. William had seen her, not as a charity case but as someone worthy, and that knowledge was a fire in her chest. The family's glares followed her as she walked toward the door, Thomas promising to meet her privately to read the letter. The library's heavy air seemed to part around her, and as she stepped into the hallway, the notebook in her pocket felt like a compass, pointing toward a truth that would redefine her place in a world that had never wanted her. The Langston estate's hallway stretched before Maya Evans like a gauntlet, its marble floors gleaming under the soft glow of sconces, each step echoing with the weight of the moment she just left behind. The library's heavy oak doors had closed behind her, muffling the Langston family's furious whispers, but their anger clung to her like damp air, a reminder of the storm she'd ignited. At 17, Maya felt the world shifting beneath her, her worn sneakers silent against the polished stone, her hand clutching the notebook in her pocket as if it could steady her racing heart. The air carried the faint scent of lavender polish, a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind, where William Langston's decision to leave her his fortune battled with the family's accusations and her own doubts. She followed Thomas Reed, the lawyer, to a smaller study down the hall, where he'd promised to read William's letter, a document that felt like a key to a door she hadn't yet found. The study was quieter, intimate, with walls lined in dark wood, and a single window letting in slanted afternoon light that danced across a mahogany desk. Thomas closed the door, his gray suit slightly rumpled now, his glasses catching the light as he set a sealed envelope on the desk. Maya stood near a leather armchair, her fingers tracing its worn arm, her dark eyes fixed on the envelope, its cream paper stark against the desk's polished surface. She thought of William's face, his kind eyes crinkling at the community center, the way he'd listened to her dreams of engineering, of building things that lasted. He'd given her the notebook, its pages filled with his cryptic notes, quotes about courage, dates she didn't recognize, fragments of a life she was only beginning to understand. Now, as Thomas broke the envelope's seal, Maya's breath caught, her body bracing for a truth that could either anchor or unravel her. Back in the library, the Langston family remained, their voices a low hum of outrage and strategy. Edward Langston stood by the fireplace, his silver hair disheveled, his hands gesturing sharply as he spoke to Cynthia and Olivia, their faces tight with disbelief. Philip, the younger brother, sat slumped in a chair, his face pale, his eyes distant as if replaying every moment he'd spent with his father, searching for clues to this betrayal. The reporter in the corner lingered, his notebook filled with scribbled quotes, his presence a ticking clock reminding them that this story would soon spill into the public, a scandal that could tarnish their name. Edward's voice cut through, insisting they hire investigators, dig into Maya's past, find proof she'd manipulated William. Cynthia nodded, her pearls clicking softly, while Olivia's fingers hovered over her phone, already drafting messages to allies who could sway opinions. But beneath their fury, a thread of fear wove through, a dawning realization that William's choice was deliberate, a puzzle they hadn't yet solved. In the study, Thomas's voice was soft but clear as he began reading William's letter, his words carrying the weight of a man who'd known his time was short. The letter was addressed to Maya, its tone warm, almost paternal, as if William were sitting across from her, his voice steady in the community center's garden. He wrote of meeting her 2 years ago, a girl whose resilience reminded him of his own youth, before wealth and ambition had hardened him. He described her kindness, her quiet strength in the face of a world that had offered her little, and how those qualities had stirred something in him, a regret for the family he'd built but never truly connected with. Maya's eyes stung, tears welling as she pictured William's face, his hand steadying hers as he gave her the notebook, saying it was a piece of him to carry forward. The letter revealed more, each sentence a revelation that tightened Maya's chest. William wrote of a secret he'd kept from his family, a truth buried in his past. Maya's mother, a woman named Grace Evans, had worked for him decades ago, a brilliant engineer whose ideas had shaped his early tech empire. Grace had left abruptly, her reasons unclear, but William had followed her life from afar, learning of her death when Maya was a child, her daughter lost to the foster system. He'd found Maya by chance at the community center, recognizing her mother's fire in her eyes, her determination to rise above her circumstances. He'd chosen her as his heir not just for her strength, but to right a wrong he'd never addressed with grace, to give Maya the future her mother deserved. The notebook, he wrote, held fragments of Grace's work, ideas he'd kept, a legacy he wanted Maya to reclaim. Maya's hands trembled, the notebook in her pocket suddenly heavier, its pages a bridge to a mother she barely remembered. She thought of Grace's face, a blurry memory of laughter and warmth, now sharpened by William's words. Thomas paused, his eyes meeting Maya's, his expression soft with empathy. He handed her the letter, its paper warm from his touch, and she clutched it, feeling as if William had given her not just wealth but a piece of her own history. The study's silence was profound, broken only by the distant hum of the estate, but Maya felt a storm within her. Grief for a mother she'd lost, gratitude for a man who'd seen her, and fear of the family who would never accept her. Back in the library, Edward rallied his family, his voice sharp with resolve, planning to contest the will, to paint Maya as a fraud. Olivia nodded, her fingers flying over her phone, while Philip remained silent, his eyes haunted, as if sensing a truth he wasn't ready to face. The reporter slipped out, his story already forming, a headline that would shake the city. Maya, in the study, felt the weight of their anger, a force that could crush her if she let it. But she thought of William's letter, his belief in her, and her mother's legacy in the notebook. She stood taller, her jaw set, her dark eyes bright with a fire she was only beginning to understand. Thomas offered to escort her out, warning her of the family's plans, but Maya shook her head, her voice steady. She wasn't ready to run, not yet. The letter and notebook were her armor, and as she stepped back into the hallway, she felt the first stirrings of a strength that could reshape not just her future, but the Langston legacy itself. The Langston estate study felt like a sanctuary now, its dark wood walls and soft light cocooning Maya Evans as she stood clutching William's letter, its words a lifeline to a past she'd barely known and a future she could scarcely imagine. The air carried the faint scent of ink and old paper, mingling with the weight of the moment, as if the room itself held its breath. At 17, Maya stood at the edge of a precipice, her worn sneakers rooted to the floor, her dark eyes bright with tears and resolve. The notebook in her pocket, filled with her mother Grace's ideas and William's cryptic notes, felt like a heartbeat against her side, a reminder of the legacy she'd inherited. Not just wealth, but a truth that could redefine her place in the world. Thomas Reed, the lawyer, stood nearby, his glasses reflecting the fading daylight, his face etched with quiet pride as he watched Maya absorb the letter's revelations. Outside, the Langston family's anger simmered, a storm waiting to break. But in this moment, Maya felt a quiet strength, as if William's faith in her had lit a fire that no one could extinguish. The hallway beyond the study hummed with the family's voices, their outrage spilling through the estate like a rising tide. Edward Langston paced the library, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier, his voice sharp as he rallied Cynthia, Olivia, and Philip to fight the will. He spoke of lawsuits, of digging into Maya's past, of proving she was a fraud who'd preyed on his father's failing health. Cynthia's pearls clicked as she nodded, her face tight with determination, while Olivia's fingers danced across her phone, already contacting lawyers and influencers to spin the narrative. Philip, however, sat silent, his eyes distant, haunted by the letter Thomas had mentioned, as if it stirred memories of his father he'd long buried. The reporter who'd lingered earlier had slipped away, his notebook brimming with a story that would hit the headlines by morning, painting Maya as either a usurper or a miracle, depending on the angle. The estate felt alive with their plans, a machine of privilege grinding to reclaim what they believed was theirs. In the study, Maya folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her pocket beside the notebook, her hands steady now, though her heart raced with the weight of what lay ahead. Thomas offered her a chair, but she remained standing, her gaze drifting to the window where the vineyard stretched beyond, its rows of green a testament to William's vision. The letter had revealed not just her mother's role in his empire, but William's regret for never acknowledging Grace's contributions, for letting her leave without a fight. He'd written of finding Maya, seeing Grace's spirit in her, and choosing her to carry forward a legacy he'd failed to honor in his lifetime. Maya thought of her mother, a blurry figure in her memory, her laughter a faint echo from childhood. The notebook, with Grace's engineering sketches and William's notes, was a bridge to her, a way to reclaim a piece of herself she'd thought lost forever. Thomas spoke softly, warning Maya that the Langstons would fight, that their wealth and influence could make her life a battlefield. He offered to arrange security, legal protection, a safe place to stay, but Maya shook her head, her voice quiet but firm. She wasn't running, not anymore. She'd spent years in foster homes, invisible, her dreams of college and stability always just out of reach. William's gift wasn't just money. It was a chance to be seen, to build something lasting, to honor her mother's brilliance. She asked Thomas to help her understand the notebook, to turn Grace's ideas into reality, perhaps a foundation to support kids like her, kids the world overlooked. Thomas nodded, his eyes shining with respect, promising to guide her through the legal maze and protect William's wishes. The library doors burst open, Edward's voice carrying down the hall as he demanded to see Maya, to confront the girl who'd stolen his birthright. Thomas stepped forward, blocking the study's entrance, his wiry frame unyielding as he told Edward the reading was over, that Maya was under his protection. Edward's face reddened, his accusations sharp, but Maya stepped past Thomas, her chin high, her dark eyes meeting Edward's without flinching. She spoke of William's kindness, his regret, his choice to right a wrong through her. Her voice trembled but held, a quiet power that silenced Edward for a moment, his anger faltering under her sincerity. Cynthia and Olivia stood behind him, their faces a mix of fury and unease, while Philip's eyes softened, as if seeing his father in Maya's words. The confrontation was brief but electric, the hallway a stage where past and present collided. Maya felt the notebook in her pocket, its weight a reminder of her mother's genius, of William's trust. She thought of the foster homes, the nights she'd felt worthless, and how William's belief had reshaped her, a transformation from invisible to undeniable. Edward retreated, his threats hollow now, the family's unity cracking as Philip lingered, his gaze lingering on Maya with something like recognition. The reporter's story would break soon, and Maya knew her life would change. Headlines, scrutiny, a world watching her every move. But she also knew she was ready, not just to inherit wealth, but to build a legacy of kindness, to honor Grace and William by lifting others up. As Thomas escorted her out, the estate's grandeur felt less imposing, its opulence a backdrop to a girl who'd found her place. Maya stepped into the evening air, the vineyard scent of earth and green wrapping around her, a promise of growth. She thought of her mother, of William's garden talks, of the notebook's pages waiting to be explored. The Langstons would fight, but Maya was no longer alone. She had Grace's spirit, William's faith, and a strength she'd forged through years of struggle. The world would know her name, not as a foster kid or a scandal, but as a force of change, a girl who turned injustice into hope, one courageous step at a time.